Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1148B, and today's date is December 9th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Operation Mop-Up is now underway. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we have been hearing fake news, fake news, fake news. The corporate media is continually pushing this. The government is continually pushing this. And that's all we hear. But very interestingly, Brian Williams, you know, the disgraced ex-NBC journalist who was fired for falsely reporting that he was in a helicopter during the Iraq War. Yeah, I know he got hired back for a reduced salary of a couple of million, but he lied. Actually, it was fake news that he used, because he said he was in this helicopter during the Iraq War that took on combatant fire. But he wasn't. He wasn't even near that location. Nothing even happened. The whole thing was completely fake, phony, and false. But he's out there, and he's trying to wage a crusade against fake news. So the fake news master is waging war on fake news. Hillary reemerged. She was speaking in Capitol Hill, and she says that fake news is an epidemic, and it's a major problem. And this is something that we need to stop, because fake news can have real-world consequences. Well, maybe these individuals don't want the truth coming out, and this is why they are trying so hard to squash it. Because remember, WikiLeaks, they released all those emails about how she set up the server, about the crony and illicit dealings of the Clinton Family Foundation, and everything else. So, yeah, these individuals, they don't want that information coming out. This is why they decided to launch their agenda against other news sources. Because, again, they want the control of information. They thought they had it with the corporate media, and they finally realized they don't have it. Well, they realized it a while ago. Now, let's look at how censorship works, how they slowly use different ways of making you believe this is why we're doing this. And in the end, what it turns out to be is censorship. Back in the 60s, the CIA called all other stories that didn't fit the narrative conspiracy theories. They made up this term to explain away all these other different stories. Now remember, there was no internet, so the information really didn't flow that easily around. The corporate media, they pretty much controlled everything. And those people who were on shortwave and things like that, they had shows and they were reporting on these different events. Now, the internet grew and it expanded, and people started to write blogs. They started to talk about different things, and more people had access to the internet, and it grew larger and larger and larger. And it grew so large that they started to realize this is a major problem. People are now talking to each other in real time. And almost everyone has access with a click of a button. So to start their push on censoring what people say, what they had to do was take it to the next level. Now, they used conspiracy theory. They kept with it. They thought this would work. Even on the internet, they said, okay, that's a conspiracy theory website, and they tried to push that off, but people started to realize, and they started to understand that, well, these stories seem to be true, and I checked some facts, and they seem to be true, and the corporate media seems to be lying. So that started to break down. And throughout all of this, since 2001, we had the terrorism, which was made up by the government. So they had to use something else. Now, they can't just come out and say, hey, we're going to shut everyone down. It's too obvious. So they say, we're going to shut down extremist sites. those terrorists, those extremists. Now, of course, the definition of extremist is very broad. Those people who talk about the government, those people who don't agree with the narrative of the government. And everyone went, yes, that's right. We should shut down and stop the extremists. That shouldn't be allowed because people are being radicalized on the internet. We need to talk to Twitter. We need to talk to Facebook. We need to talk to YouTube. We need to shut all this down. A little bit harder to talk to individual blogs because people own their blogs. They can talk to the hosting company, but it's easier to talk to the big social networks. So they put that into place. And we saw Twitter, Facebook, and all of them start to shut all that down. Well, that didn't work either. It wasn't really meant to do anything because it was all fake. We know where the terrorism comes from. Comes from the government. So then they had to move it to the next level. Now they do this very slowly. Look how they're doing this. In the beginning, everyone says, yes, we should go for this. So what's the next rah-rah thing that people are going to join in with? Hate speech. Now everyone, we're going to block hate speech. What is hate speech? We don't know. But anything hateful, we're blocking. Because something hateful to you might be different than another person. And everyone goes, yes, we shouldn't have hate. Look how the government uses words. Remember, it's always the opposite of what they're doing. So hate speech was the next thing. So now they have YouTube, they have Facebook, they have all the social media outlets out there shutting down hate. And anything you say could be considered hate. I don't like your brown hair. Hate speech. Oh my God. They lumped in racism with that. Well, you're a racist. That's not allowed either. So you can see how this is moving along here. So they got hate speech, racism, extremists. Now, people are okay with all of this. They have to take it to the next level. Well, bad Russians, Russian propaganda. Let's block anyone that doesn't agree with the U.S. government and sides with Russia. Everyone goes, yes, we don't like Russia. Russia's bad. So let's block that. And then we had the election. And they couldn't understand how Hillary Clinton lost because the corporate media was pushing their agenda. They couldn't understand how this went south. So forget conspiracy theory. Let's just move to the next level. Anyone that's reporting anything that doesn't agree with the government is now called fake news. Now you see how slowly and methodically they do this. Step by step. Now everyone's going, well, wait a minute. Fake news? This is something different. This is not about hate. This is not about extremism. This is about saying that anyone that doesn't speak with the corporate media, who's not in line with the government, and reports on different facts, you're considering them fake? And now we have a problem. Because now they're attacking free speech. But you see how they're doing this. Now, there are people out there, and a lot of people saying, yes, we should get rid of fake news. But of course, what's happening, parts of it's backfiring. Because people are pointing out that the corporate media has been reporting fake news. But of course, that's not going to stop them. So what did they do? They started to create tools to block fake news sites, to report that, is this site real? Is this stories real? The little tool will tell you, no, it's fake. Go away. The next step after this, they're just going to block the sites completely. They will censor news stories and websites. I know everyone's going, no, they can't do that. Of course they can. Look what they've done so far. That's the next step. This is how censorship creeps up on you. This is how they do this. They get you all on board thinking that you're going after extremism, hate, racism, and they slowly bring it in where they're removing free speech, freedom of the press, because that's their main agenda. They can't have this out there, and you know what? They're pushing it as hard as they possibly can now. Because if you're not in line with the corporate media, with the government, you're considered fake if you're telling a different story. And they're going to take this to the next level. Now, U.S. Senators Rob Portman and Chris Murphy, they announced that their Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act sounds really good, doesn't it? Every time they come up with a bill, remember, it's always the opposite, which really means they're going after fake news. Well, it looks like this was passed by the Senate. And the passage of this bill in the Senate today takes us one critical step closer to censorship. Now, when the president signs this bill into law, the United States will finally have a dedicated set of tools and resources to confront our adversaries. Widespread efforts to spread false narratives that undermine democratic institutions and compromise Americans' foreign policy goals, well, that's coming to an end. Hey, how about the United States government and the corporate media just tell the truth? Because you know what? When you tell the truth, you don't have to worry about anything else, because the truth can stand on its own. But what they're doing is they're creating this law to cover up their lies, to cover up their fake news, to go after those people who want to tell the truth, who are trying to get the truth out there, and they're going to be stopped. That's what this is really all about. Now, in California, well, they introduced a bill, SB 54, or this is a great title, California Values Act. Now, if you disagree with this legislation, then you're immoral, racist, because you have to remember, the government, the state governments, they always create these bills. So the title can't make you say, well, I'm against that. The Affordable Care Act, I'm against affordability, right? The Patriot Act, I don't want to be a patriot. The USA Freedom Act, I don't want freedom. They use these titles on purpose. The California Values Act, well, I'm not into values. So you can see how they use this. Now, the reason why they're passing this is to give illegal immigrants safe zones. And basically what it says is that the bill would force public schools, hospitals, and courthouses to establish safe zones that limit immigration enforcement on their premises. So basically it stops those individuals who are coming to remove the illegals who are here illegally in this country. So they're trying to get this bill passed in California. Japan, well, they did something very interesting. The upper house of the Japanese parliament, they ratified the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Well, right now that's dead in the water. They know that Trump is completely against it. So do they know something that we don't? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Now, out in South Korea, we see President Park. Well, she was impeached in corruption scandal. The lawmakers voted 234 to 56 to impeach President Park over accusations of bribery, abuse of power, and violating her constitutional duties, setting the stage for her to become the country's first elected leader to be expelled from office in disgrace. And during this period, there were mass protests demanding for her resignation, and she's been accused of colluding with a friend and a former aide, both of who have been indicted by prosecutors to pressure big businesses to donate to two foundations set up to back her policy initiatives. Kind of sounds like here in the United States. Now, the U.S. is out there saying that we're going to remain a steadfast ally to South Korea, and we'll have to see how this all plays out. We see the United States government central bankers, they are now sending nearly 1,500 troops to Afghanistan in support of Operation Freedom's Sentinel, in addition to 800 soldiers that will be deployed to the conflict area. And we can see right now that, we've said this in the past, the soldiers are never leaving Afghanistan. This is a strategic location. Russia and China are in Afghanistan. There's oil, there's lithium, there's copper, there's poppy fields to pay for the covert operations of the CIA. And at this point, they're never leaving this area. We're going to see more and more troops move into these areas than actually are going to leave these areas. Spain right now is sending about 150 soldiers to Iraq, and they still need approval to do this, but most likely they will get the approval and they'll send the soldiers there. Turkey right now is ruling on a bill to allow Erdogan to have more power. And this is a constitutional change which has been sought by Erdogan since he became president in 2014. So what does this do? It allows Erdogan to have a lot more power and basically turn into a dictator. We see Turkey right now, they have about 9,000 soldiers in Syria right now going into Al-Bab in the Aleppo province. There's about 8,000 pro-Turkey militants, 1,000 Turkish troops, 140 armored vehicles, 35 artillery units, unknown number of heavy military equipment, at least 15 units, and they're sending in 300 elite troops from the 11th Command Brigade to participate in this major offensive. Sounds like an invasion to me, because we can see right now that Turkey is trying to block out this gigantic safe zone. This is their mission there. Remember, the elite, the central bankers, they haven't given up yet. Now, the Pentagon is out there, and they're trying to convince Turkey that it wasn't Russia who bombed their troops. It wasn't Syria who bombed their troops. It was Iran. Now, of course, they have no proof. The Pentagon, however, using an unnamed Pentagon official, said that there's no evidence, but we do believe it must have been Iran. Again, they're trying to stir things up. They're trying to get Turkey to go after Iran right now. Now, Aleppo civilians are saying that while they were being held by the moderate rebels, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, the Islamic State, they were tortured, there were executions, it was absolutely horrible. And we see right now that the United States government central bankers, they are still arming, supporting these terrorist groups. They haven't stopped. The ceasefire, where Russia and Syria said, listen, we're going to try to remove civilians. Well, the terrorists, they didn't let the ceasefire happen. They opened fired, and Syria and Russia had to, once again, start fighting. Now, of course, the United States government central bankers are going to come out and say, see, they didn't keep their promise. But they're missing that one important thing, that the terrorists, their terrorist groups, wouldn't allow the ceasefire. Now, it looks like the United States government, they're mopping up everything that has to do with the Islamic State, because the jig is up, and they destroyed about 168 oil trucks. The special forces are going in, taking, hard drives, papers, and anything else they can get their hands on to make sure there's no evidence linking all of this back to the CIA, to the coalition forces. And right now, Operation Mop Up is in full swing. And we can see this is exactly what they're doing at this point. They're trying to cover their tracks. Now, Obama formally approves arming terrorists in Syria. What he did was he lifted the restrictions. Now, of course, they're out there saying, well, that still means that we're not going to give them advanced weapons like manpads. But we can see right now, this is exactly what they want to do. And he signed a memorandum to allow this to happen. And this is about giving the terrorists an edge over Syrian jets, Russian jets, and we'll have to see how this plays out because there's a lot of things happening right now. We have the new Syrian force that the Pentagon created. We have the terrorist groups, and Obama just took this to the next level. Now, something very interesting just happened. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, she introduced the Stop Arming Terrorists Act yesterday. Now, the legislation would prohibit the U.S. government from using American taxpayer dollars to provide funding, weapons, training, and intelligence support to groups like the Levant Front, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Al-Sham, or to give money to countries that are providing direct or indirect support to those groups. Now, Tulsi Gabbard said, under U.S. law, it is illegal for any American to provide money or assistance to Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, or any other terrorist group. If you or I gave money, weapons, or support to these groups, we would be thrown in jail. Yet, the U.S. government has been violating this law for years, quietly supporting allies and partners of all these terrorist groups. And the question is, how come these individuals are not in jail? Because again, we have two sets of laws, one for them and one for the everyday person, and they're above the laws. Now, Obama did something very interesting today. Now, we know that Trump is going to be sworn in on January 20th. Obama has directed the intelligence community to conduct a full review of the alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election. And he wants Congress to present their findings before the inauguration on January 20th. Very interesting. Remember when Hillary was having the debates with Trump, she said that there were 17 U.S. intelligence agencies that had confirmed that Russia was involved in hacking. Now, of course, there weren't 17 intelligence agencies. Actually, it came down to one very ambiguous comment by the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, which actually offered no evidence and didn't actually confirm Russian involvement at all. But we'll just overlook that right now. But the real thing here is, what are they doing? Remember, they tried to derail the electoral vote on December 19th. It doesn't seem like that's working. We know they have protests and riots planned for the inauguration, and now Obama came out with this, because if they say, yeah, we found evidence that Russia did hack the elections, we're going to have to say these are null and void right now. I mean, it looks like this is where they're headed with this. But the only hacking that took place during the election was by the Department of Homeland Security against the Georgia voter database, because Georgia was reporting that DHS actually hacked them. Now, I wonder if the intelligence report is going to show that DHS did hacking. Most likely not. But we can see where they're headed with this. We know what they're trying to do. And we can see at this point they're going to do whatever they possibly can to stop Donald Trump from becoming president. Will it work? We don't know. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.